Welcome to Real Life Giants with the Commissioner and Dr. T. I'm Dr. T, and the Commissioner is giving me the reins today, but told me I could bring in a co-host. And so I got the amazing Dr. Cynthia Williams here today. One of my new girls, my new homies. We just have a good time, but she is a guru in grief and trauma and therapy and those types of things. And I think that our audience needed to hear her voice. So today we're going to keep it 100 and we're going to talk about childhood trauma. So before we get into it, Dr. Cynthia, I want you to introduce yourself to the people and let us know how you got from the fly girl in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, to where you are now and a little bit about what's in between.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. T. And tell the commissioner it's always my pleasure for me to fill in for him, first off. Thank you so
I
much. So,
will.
yes, I am Dr. Cynthia Williams. I am a grief and trauma doula, and I have a passion and purpose to assist others to recover from grief and trauma. I know it's one of the most difficult things that any person has to challenge themselves to endure and conquer. But I was given so many different life experiences and then allowed myself to master the skills I was taught so that I could help our community, my friends, their family, my family, and anybody that I kind of come across to understand that grief and trauma are emotionally attached to you, but it's not you. It doesn't run you,
Yes.
you run it. And you have to know that it can take over your life just like the chicken pox did when it did, or just like any type of flu bug you get and you can't let go of until you doctor it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, yes, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I came to Atlanta, Georgia as a young girl, like my early 20s. And I really just was running from my old life. Like it really wasn't enduring anymore and up north.
Right.
And I had became a big fish in a little pond. And so
Mm-hmm.
doing that, I found myself growing in street activity. And after being
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of it, I put myself into an arena of people who didn't guide me for greatness. They guided me
Mm.
for improper structure. And I didn't
Sure.
realize that it was going to affect me the way it did. So I came
Mm-hmm.
to Atlanta and ended up going and doing 15 months in a federal prison. And after coming out, I found myself losing family members that really mattered. I lost my grandmother
Mm-hmm.
first. And then 2 months later, I lost my dad. And he passed away on my grandmother's birthday. We think we about to celebrate her birthday from passing 2 months ago. And my dad dies
Mm-hmm.
on that day. So it shifted the whole day. And it was so
Right.
detrimental to lose her and then lose her son, who's my father, 2 months later. And I just couldn't get it. I began to, for the first time in my life at 35 years old, try to understand death. It just did not
Mm-hmm.
make sense to me. I couldn't
Right.
understand how people in the streets have died, but I didn't wake
Mm-hmm.
up to them, so I didn't miss them in the house, and I didn't miss
That's right.
them with certain hugs and structure, right?
Right.
You
Right.
just when you know of people that die, it don't hit like those you are attached to, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And just a few months after that, I began to understand that I needed to find out how to grieve my dad and my grandmother. And I remember telling myself, I don't want to do that. I'm
Yeah.
just, yeah, I'm not doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 years later, my 17-year-old son was killed in a car accident. And I was forced to understand death just to live again. I
Yeah.
was forced to keep my sanity.
Mm-hmm.
I was forced to live after that loss and still take care of three other kids. Like I
Right.
was forced.
Right.
So while understanding it, I was going to different therapists. They weren't helping me. They were trying to just give me medicine to survive. And
Right.
it didn't help me. I needed tools. I didn't know tools was what I needed. I just knew what they were
Right.
giving me wasn't working. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working for this attorney's office here in Atlanta and just contractual work, coming in, kind of helping with their clients whose family members had passed away. And they sent me to school. And the
Mm-hmm.
rest is history. And that was about 14 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I- the you said something very key. You didn't get tools from therapists, and I think in our community, just keeping it a buck, we don't therapy is kind of taboo, right?
Hmm.
And probably in our dynamic, we really didn't grow up hearing it, right? Everything, happen on goes in the house, stays in the house, and that type of thing. But grief hit you in the face 3 times, right? With people, like you said, that were close to you, your grandmother, paternal grandmother, your father, and then your son. Because people talk about losing parents. You think at some point you see them leaving before you, but to lose a child, and a child, and I hear a mother say it, it's different,
Oh, yeah.
right? When you lose your baby, it's different. And so having to come face to face with that, knowing these new tools that you have, how did you really anchor yourself in without getting lost in it while you were still trying to help others? I think that was loaded what I'm saying, but it's almost like you had to learn to be this grief and therapist doula in the midst of dealing with your own trauma. You know what I'm saying? How did you get to the point where you were able, where it didn't consume you and you were able to deal with it, but also position yourself to help other people?
Well, I think that's a good question, first off. And what you find yourself doing is accepting that
Mm,
grief is a part of you and you live a new normal life after, right? So your life becomes normal in a different way because the
mhm.
people that you had a normal life with have passed away. Now you got to learn to live
Right.
without them and just hold on to the memories that they've given you. But when you're able to help others, we're really just teaching how to live by way of repetition and how we are able to walk through this thing. What did I do? How did I move? Who was my support system? What worked for me? What didn't work for me? So, when the tools that you get just to understand how you're moving is what you teach, right? And
Mm.
people think that it's
Yes.
a whole sense of break the brain down. Well, yeah, so you do. You break it down,
Right.
but just to educate those who are grieving that there's a small portion of your brain that holds your grief and trauma and takes
Right.
you into a negative of space and capacity that allows you to live with just get up and go to the bathroom, right? But your
Right.
bladder
Right.
is full, but your mind is saying, I just want to rest. I just don't want to get up. I
Yeah.
just, right? And so
Right.
now we run into
That's
the
right.
bathroom right before we have to release, right?
Right.
But the body showed you a long time ago. So trauma makes
Yeah.
us stop listening to our body signals, and the brain will get comfortable with it and educate you and empower you by way of breaking something down or something begins to hurt or right. So you're just
Mm-hmm.
teaching people that the longer you hold the grief and trauma, the more you stop and stunt your growth of your own life. Just
Mm.
live again, right? And
Right.
you're saying, no, I
Right.
need to stay in the moment of the loss. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
telling you and teaching them that's one memory of the person, right?
Right.
However old
Right.
they are, we got thousands of memories. Why are we holding on to just the death, right? So when someone educated me on that and I mastered it, I don't know that my
Mm-hmm.
mind, body, and soul really attaches to them, but I
Mm-hmm.
absorb some of it, right?
Gotcha.
But it's not
Yep.
enough that I can keep. I can't keep all of it, but I absorb some of it.
Right. Right. I think in our community, we don't really understand trauma, right? I think we just come to walls and things like that. Like, how do you help people understand what trauma is? because I think more of us are dealing with trauma than we actually realize, and we're stuck
Yeah.
in a place or a situation or a circumstance that happens. Because I'll tell you, when my mom passed away, I was 24,
Mm-hmm.
and she was in Chicago and I was here, and I went a few days before she passed. She had been sick off and on, but I went a few days before she passed. When I came back, she passed. And you can hear people talking and things going around. They didn't really tell me. And I finally said, "My mom passed, right?" And y'all trying to figure out how to tell me. Just tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, she passed, right? Funeralized her, went through all the things, no crying, no breakdown, nothing, just kept going, kept going,
Mm-hmm.
kept going. Probably about a year later, went to call her on the phone and just lost it, just broke down. And it was like, okay, because you used to calling her every day, but you just, in this year, you just moving, you know what I'm saying? Keeping yourself busy. And then it hit you all at once. It's like, what? Oh, you know what I'm saying? And I think a lot of people don't recognize that or give themselves space to grieve because you think you should get over it, right? But everybody's different. Everybody, we put pressure. Some people just put pressure on ourselves, and some people use it as a crutch. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm grieving like years and years and years. I mean, I know people that just get stuck. And you understand it, but it's like you're gonna have to move past it and find whatever that new normal is, because it's crippling you as an individual, because you just see them stuck. Like, you can see them stuck in that moment. And I don't think I could put it to words at the time what it was. And it was grief,
Oh yeah.
right? But we don't really recognize how to put words to it. I don't know if that's something that you teach your clients. How do I, you know, describe it, and then begin to put, trying to explain to your, that you understand a lot of what they've dealt with. But sometimes people don't have to be, they're not able to put words to what they're dealing with. That makes
It
sense.
does make sense. And a lot of people are not just emotionally intelligent to be able to describe it in words, because we grew up
Mm,
with a sense of just saying either I'm okay or I don't feel well. Not my
mm,
heart hurts because I started thinking about my mother and father divorcing, and I don't think I ever resolved that. Like, what did it feel like? Oh, it felt like my heart started palpitating. When I thought about it, I began to sweat, and it just made me very anxious. And right, so we have to be able to explain what our thoughts make our body do, so that we are
mm.
aware of channeling the thoughts in a different direction, or not holding on
Yeah.
to it so long, so that you're able
Hmm.
to literally say, you know what, I don't know how to explain how I feel, but I feel
Right.
like I'm getting sick, right? And so when I'm
Hmm.
explaining to them about being intelligent about their emotions, is to tell me what
Hmm.
their body does when their thoughts make them go that route. Like, what happens? Oh,
Right.
okay, so you were scared, right? You weren't
Hmm.
anxious, right? What did you
Right.
fear? What do you,
Right.
right? You're
Right.
sad,
Right.
right? You're
Yeah.
crying,
Mhm.
but we just have to
Right.
empower with emotional intelligence, one. And then next is
Yeah.
educating people that you do stay stuck. And grief is just
Right.
not death. Grief is so many different entities, and it is all individualized. But it's
Yes.
when you lose something that you were not ready to let go of. So
Hmm.
when you lose it, you literally stunt and stay right there, because you try to figure it out
Hmm.
first.
Right.
You stay in shock. You try
Right.
to recognize how, but what the differentiator is with everybody else is somebody recognizes that the clock in the calendar keeps ticking. Somebody
Hmm.
chases everything just to make sure the calendar ticks again so they can get to the next day. So you just running and
Right.
running and running and running and running to not deal with it. And then you look up
Yeah.
and it's been a year, right? So we call that
Mhm.
trap trauma. We know it's trauma, but we want to trap it
Yeah.
inside of us so that we think that it
Yeah.
will never seep out, right? But I always
Hmm.
educate people that it's like 2-day old garbage. It's going to seep out. You're going to walk up somewhere and what do I smell? Right? What's
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
smell? It's
Right.
going to seep out because somebody's going to call and then you're going to get a trigger. It's seeping out. You're going to see something on
Mm-hmm.
TV. It's going to trigger.
Yep.
It's seeping out.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody gonna
Yep.
call you and just say, I was just thinking about you. And that was the day you tried to avoid it. It begins to seep out. And so then we have this thing what we call the lost pot, right? You know, the body, I always say that with trauma, I equate the body to the very middle of an onion or the very middle
Okay.
of an artichoke, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because those two vegetables have a multitude of layers that eat, they
Yeah.
start very small, right? And then they get become very thick around. The onion can be
That's
very
right.
huge, but the most
Right.
potent part of the onion is that middle part, right? People
That's
take
right.
the layers and
Mm-hmm.
they chop the layers up, right?
Yeah.
But what you don't
Mm-hmm.
know is that the middle part is you, and everything attached to you that you didn't let go are just the layers of the onion, and the next issue, right, covers up the other
Mm-hmm.
layer. Well, the largest layer
Right.
of the onion is on the outside, right? That's the
Mhm.
one that you just can't shake. You
Yeah.
just can't let that go, right? The
Yeah.
one in the middle, that's the core, and the ones underneath, they're just the
Mm-hmm.
small ones, them childhood things, traumas. Your first boyfriend broke your heart. Your ex. You're right. So these are the don't
Right.
nothing trump the heartbreak of losing your child or the divorce of the
Yeah.
people you loved and y'all didn't know how to communicate, and the pawning of the children, and it's so many different layers that we give titles to. It cannot be compared from one person to the
Right.
next, because even
Right.
if we had the same trauma, our DNA alone don't allow us to tackle it the same
True.
way. Right?
The
It
same
could
way.
be our,
And I
our
think, you
mama.
know, people, and that's so true. I think people, when we can't identify some feelings and emotions and we suppress them, we pick up ways of coping that we think are ways of coping and they're really not. And we resist a therapist or we resist the actual things that can help us
Mhm.
begin to deal with it. Because you use all these things that we just use, you're muted.
Yeah.
We just use those things that we just pick up somewhere and they're not always good tools. And so you get people that are just, I don't, for lack of a better word, just kind of zombies
Yeah.
because they're trying to self therapy. If I can say it that
Mm-hmm.
way,
Mm-hmm.
uh, either there's a stigma attached to therapy, or they feel like you mentioned, couldn't find the right therapist and just kind of gave up and went to Instagram or went to this the internet or went to that, and then they just really make it worse until it just, like you said, not only seeps out, but it just explodes. And
Right.
then it's like, where did all that come from? And then you feeling guilty because you're like, I shouldn't, I'm at this level or what have you for some. I shouldn't be dealing with this, but they may not have a Dr. Cynthia
Oh,
to be able to unpack.
right.
You know what I'm saying?
The, far too kind. That's why I love you. But so
Right.
then we have a lost pot, right? And the
Mm.
lost pot
Hmm.
is the body, okay, is a
Right.
big pot. And I always want everybody to
Hmm.
look at it like the body is the big
Right.
pot. It's on a
Yeah.
stove, right? With the
Yeah.
fire of the
Mm.
stove being life itself, right?
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
inside the pot is circles that represent things, places, people,
Yeah.
right? We,
Yeah.
of course, we got our automatic bubbles, which is your mother and your father, right? Then, if you have a
Hmm.
husband and you have children, if you have siblings, those are all part of the loss, right? They're just losses of every one of the people attached to you in your life, somehow, some way, have added a crack in your heart. If it
Mm.
was a broken promise, if it
Mm.
was betrayal, right? We talking
Mm-hmm.
immediate family, right? We
Right.
talking we
Right.
ain't even
Right.
outside the house yet,
Right. Right.
right? Yeah.
Hello.
So
Mm-hmm.
now we little when we can. I remember when I got a whooping, cause right. Oh, I
Yeah.
remember that
Right.
time I got on punishment. So these things are there and they stick to us. Hence, it's trauma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
makes it why there is not a person walking the earth, not nan human walking the earth that does not have trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone's
Right.
exempt. No
Mm-hmm.
one is exempt from pain.
That's right.
No one is exempt from pain.
That's
How
right.
you handle it builds and molds your character.
Right.
You can be an angry person with it. You walk around fighting and doing all kinds of stuff. You'll trick yourself off the street,
Right.
grave or jail,
That's right.
right?
Right.
Passive. They might use you, walk over you. You know what I mean? It's so many different entities to how you relate to grief and trauma
Yeah.
that it'll mold you and how you move in life.
Yeah. What, because for some that are listening, be like, ooh, Dr. T, you and Dr. Cynthia have called me out. What are some steps that I should take once I identify I'm dealing with some trauma? Right.
Yeah.
And you said something really key. We didn't even get outside the immediate family with your mother, father, grandmothers, grandfathers, siblings, because I'm seeing so much, and I experience it myself, where people want you to be something to them that you're simply not or can't be,
Mm-hmm.
and the relationship, once close, is severed, right? And they move into space and you move into space, but it's cordial, even though y'all, immediate, but there's that unspoken, you hurt my feelings or you betrayed me. And then it just spreads.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? How would you suggest somebody begin to deal with, and that's just one example,
Mm-hmm.
with just the immediate things you're dealing with? Because we're not even talking about, like you said, that's just immediate. We're not talking about work, other social events,
Mm-hmm.
community, right? Church, all different types of things. So if you just got a big old tumbleweed, you know what I'm saying? When you start from your immediate and then it just kind of spreads, you're unpacking a lot of stuff. And then if you got a stigma attached to therapy and now you listen to us, you're like, where do I start? You know what I mean? Because you could overwhelm yourself just trying to think about, okay, well, what I'm gonna deal with first. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Especially if I had a stigma attached to trauma, which a lot of people I meet, they have it. It's almost like they feel guilty because they want to get help.
Yeah. That's what they feel guilty because people who feel guilty of people around them don't get help. So they ain't trying to
Mm,
be the guinea pig. I'm not trying
true,
to do that,
true.
right? You
That's
gotta
true.
have
That's true.
really get it got to the trauma inside of you that lasts so long gonna irritate you so bad you don't care if you're the first one to do it.
Yeah,
You ain't looking for
that's
no
true.
validation from nobody else. You want to
That's
feel better, right?
true. That's true.
So first things first is you gotta breathe and inhale and exhale so hard because your life about to change when you accept the process to heal. So just get
Right.
ready. It's like you got in your car,
Right.
you put your seatbelt on,
Mm-hmm.
you then start the car, and you trying to see if
Mm-hmm.
you finna go and drive.
Yeah.
Once you put your foot on the brake is when it starts. Once you shift into gear is when you take
Mm-hmm.
off. But in
Mm-hmm.
order to know what to tackle first, you need to know where your brain has taken your feet.
Mm.
What have you walked through? So I
Right.
educate people. I'm telling you now that you got to go back to conception. You need to know what you've walked through in your life and ask yourself, what's your very first memory? Now,
Mm-hmm.
people don't really know how far they can go back until they begin to pull the layers back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now they're pulling the
Mm-hmm.
layers back, and this pick up what I'm putting down now.
Yeah.
You gotta like put yourself on a timeline of events.
Right.
You draw a graph out. You create a pros and cons on this graph.
Mm-hmm.
The top part of the graph for pros, those are great things happen in your life. Birth of a child, graduations, marriage dates, uh, your colleges, whatever, babies, wives, whatever made you smile and you felt accomplished. I don't
Right.
care if it was taking the garbage out. If that was an accomplishment and you did it,
Right.
you put it up there, right? Whatever
That's
gives
right.
you your own kudos to you.
Right.
No,
Right.
that's you. The
That's right.
pros, right, are
Mm-hmm.
those things that
Mm-hmm.
literally are negative, you hate it, it destroyed you, you couldn't move, it changed your life, you got stuck, those your cons, right?
Right.
So now that we
Right.
have the differentiator between the two, right? You got to go back as far as your brain takes you back. You got to see what that first memory is in your life. So I say, do the process of elimination. What
Right.
you get for Christmas? What's the very first Christmas you got? What you get? Right?
Right.
And you're like, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
remember I was
Mm-hmm.
about four. I got me a big wheel, got me a green machine. Oh, I had that,
That's
right?
right.
So now that's a
Right.
pro. You remember that,
Mm-hmm.
right? What?
Mm-hmm.
So how old were you? Oh, I had to be about 8. Okay, all right. So you didn't get no gifts
Mm-hmm.
before 8. Well, yeah. Okay, let's think about it. The thing about this exercise and this tool is
Right.
no one can help you.
Mm.
You need to make sure your brain remembers it because the brain is set up to go to conception of the mother. But how many people
Right.
can remember swimming in their mother's belly?
Right.
Right? Most people don't
Mm-hmm.
remember when they learn to walk. So
No.
there's something significant that happened that raised the endorphins in the brain that says, or right? It
Right.
whatever it
Right.
was, it shifted the life, it created the memory, and it began to mold who you are today. So you
Yeah.
create the memory, right? It's a never ending tool because you're not going to
Right.
remember it all until something triggers the memory to make you remember it, right?
Right.
And you make the
Mm-hmm.
notches. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, instance, I always share it so people know I was born in 1971. I remember my
Mm-hmm.
fifth birthday party in 1976, right? I'm sitting there
Mm-hmm.
like I'm Diana Ross, my hair all over my head. I'm coming out, just came out, and I had these
That's right.
hee-haw overalls on without no shirt on. Like I'm thinking I'm super fly. And I remember my mother and my dad getting into it because I wanted my hair out.
Right.
And my mother, like, well, she got to go to church tomorrow. You don't know what you got to deal with her to get her hair done. My daddy saying,
Right.
just let her do it. It's her birthday. My mama like, I got you tomorrow for church, and I don't want to hear nothing. And I can remember
Mm-hmm.
right now today sitting in church like, because it hurt so bad to get my hair
Right.
combed. There was a part of me saying, Daddy, I wish you would have just let her win that one, right? Then there was another part of me saying, but I like that he was messing with me and let me do my
That's right.
thing, you know what I'm saying? So a pro and a con on the same day,
That's right.
right?
That's
So
right.
now you
That's
go
right.
through it and you say, hey, I remember my first fight. I remember
Right.
molestation in the house when
Yeah.
I'm 6. I
Yeah.
remember my parents divorcing at 8. I remember us
Mm-hmm.
having to move and stuff getting cut off. Like I remember the impactful things to my life, and that's how you
Right.
do the first tool.
Right.
You gotta get
Right.
what we working on, what we healing
Right.
for, right? You